Hello and welcome. It's nice to have you here.
Hi, thanks very much. It's nice to be here.
Brilliant. If you would like to give yourself a quick introduction of who you are and what you do.
Okay, well, my name's Alistair Aitcheson. I'm an indie game developer, so I full-time work as a one-man game studio. At the moment, I'm focusing on making games for the iPhone and iPad platforms. And this year, I released two games: Greedy Bankers, a puzzle game on the iPhone, and Greedy Bankers versus the World, which is a sort of multiplayer sequel on the iPad.
Yeah, and they're really good games. They're so much fun.
Thanks very much.
And they're very funny as well.
Cheers.
You haven't exactly vilified the bankers, but they are the butt of many of your jokes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down into the visual style, as well as programming all the stuff. As well as doing all the programming and code and things like that, I also do all the artwork for the studio as well. So I like to give everything a kind of very cartoony visual style, and sort of find myself inspired by a lot of things like Animaniacs and a lot of the classic sort of mid-90s cartoons.
Oh, wonderful.
And I like to try and infuse that into the artwork that I produce for the game.
All the pictures for the bankers you drew yourself. They do look hand drawn, and it's really nice. It gives a homemade feel to the game.
Yeah. Well, that's something I really want to work on. Work up on at the moment. I mean, I do everything. It's actually all done using quite an old version of PaintShop Pro, actually, and just a graphics tablet. But I mean, I want my games to be, polished enough to look professional, and from the feedback that I've had, it looks like they are. But I want to keep in that kind of personal touch. I want it, all of my games to have a consistent visual style and feel about them, so that when you pick up an Alistair Aitcheson game, you should know it's an Alistair Aitcheson game. Because I want to have that feeling that there's a guy on the other side of this who's presented you a fun product that he wants you to play and enjoy, rather than coming from a faceless studio, kind of mechanical or anything. It looks personal and unique and friendly and endearing. So yeah, I do work. The artwork is something that's very important to me, but it's also actually it's really. I mean, I know we've just started talking about the artwork, but really, it's the core element that I really love is working on the gameplay. It's a puzzle game where you have these gems that drop into your bank vault, and you need to organize them into squares and rectangles. And the bigger the shapes get, the more valuable they are. And what you end up with is it's a sort of space manipulation puzzle where you're trying to organize everything into the optimal space so that you can make the most money you can within the time limit, and the bankers are there sort of cheering you on or demanding you more money as the game goes on and the targets get higher. And then the really exciting one is, personally I really very pleased with how it turned out, is the iPad version, which I released in September, which adds in multiplayer. So you can take on a friend, you share the game board, and you can actually each player takes half of the game board, and players are encouraged to reach across the board and nab the gems and steal them, and there's actually a bonus for doing so. So what you end up with is, it's not just competing strategically on the game board, you're actively sort of getting in each other's way and interacting outside the game board, and it's really fun. That actually, really fun to watch when people are playing. I was showing it at Game City in Nottingham back last month, and we did have a couple of wrestling matches going on that started as a result of the game.
Yeah, definitely. You put your players in each other's way, and the bankers in the single player part of the game are your opponent otherwise. Do you see the player as kind of a banker, or is he definitely against the bankers?
I like to keep it ambiguous, to be honest. I mean, it's funny. I mean, from the looks of the game, it looks a lot like you know, it is very openly satirical, and it's really there to poke fun at the bankers and the financial crisis. But I don't want it to be, too, like it's firing an idea down your throat. So it's actually kind of ambiguous whose side you're on, and that, especially between the different game modes. And it's really up to the players to decide whether they're playing on the side of the bankers or whether they're playing, against the bankers to defeat the bankers, and that's something I think is quite fun. I mean, it's funny. The actual idea for basing the game around bankers didn't come as a kind of protest thing. It was really more of a kind of whimsical joke. Well, it was really more on a play that. You see, I have this thing that I've sort of, perspective on the world that in everything, everyone always needs to have a villain for some reason, and that's actually where a lot of the inspiration came from to make a game, because it's a puzzle game. It's a pure and simple. It's very much, and the focus is on these exciting game of strategy and manipulation and trying to beat high scores, and it's high energy and everything. And it was really, it's kind of hard to describe, but the actual banking theme came up as an in-joke between me and a friend very early on, out of the fact that I said, well, everything needs to have a villain, and everyone at the moment, whether they know about economics or not, everyone knows that greedy bankers are the villains, and every video game seems to need a villain as well. So what happens if I put this sort of banking theme into a setting, into a game which isn't a priori it's about banking, and turn it into a game about banking purely on the basis of the theme? And the funny thing about that was everybody loved it. Everybody loved the idea that it was a game about the bankers and that it was poking fun at the, and it was taking down the bankers from the medium of video games. And I said, sure, why not? Take from it whatever you want to take from it, because that's kind of what I wanted to do. I didn't want to ram a political message down people's throats. I just wanted people to, interpret the theme however they wanted, I guess.
Obviously, you've been. It's everything you said has worked out quite well with your game, and you've been quite successful with it.
Yeah. The exciting one, I mean, the first one that kicked everything off really was the Greedy Bankers versus the World, which is the multiplayer one, was selected for, it was the Eurogamer Indie Game Arcade back in September, so I got to show off the game up at Earl's Court at the Eurogamer Games Expo, and I was, there for 4 days with the other indie developers showing it off, and there was a phenomenal number of people coming through trying out the game. Most exciting of all was the people who came back for more. Actually, that was that put a bit of a smile on my face when people they play a bit of the game, go away, and then come back with a friend and say, right, you have to play this, and that kind of warmed my heart a bit. It's nice to see that people enjoy your work enough to make them want to show it to a friend. I've also done a similar thing. I got involved in the Game City event up in Nottingham a few weeks ago, and that was great fun as well. And it was a similar setup there.
It was very good fun.
Yeah. No, it was a great place. It was a great place for indie developers to show off what they were doing to a general public. It wasn't. The nice thing about Game City is it's not aimed directly at gamers. It's aimed at the general public and getting everyone involved in games. And one thing that I want with my games is not for them, I want them to be inclusive. I want everyone to be able to enjoy Greedy Bankers, and so it doesn't, or at least I designed it so that it shouldn't have any prerequisite understanding of games involved. It's fairly simple. The mechanics are very what's the word? You manipulate. It's all very intuitive, all done with your hands and fingers.
Yeah.
in quite a simple way, so that anyone can pick up the puzzle whether they're gamers or not. So it meant that Game City was actually a great setting for it.
Yeah, that's one of the good things about the iPad and various touchscreens. It makes the experience very tactile.
Tactile, that was the word I was looking for.
Oh, good. What I was going to go back to was that you said the indie scene is very human friendly. You can tell that there's another person on the other side of the game. Someone's worked on this, put a lot of effort into it, has taken care over it, rather than a large company such as EA, Ubisoft has churned out the games. I mean, they make amazing games too, but there's a human property to the indie scene.
Indie scene, which I think is actually one of our greatest strengths as indie developers. You know, we have that option, we have that ability to be people and to communicate with our players in a way that large companies cannot. And, you know, we're small, we're versatile, you know, we're quick to adapt. And that actually, you know, right now, it puts indies in quite a, you know, a useful... It gives us an advantage. You know, we might not have the marketing budgets that the big studios have, but other than that, I mean, you don't need to have a massive technological powerhouse to be able to make, you know, fun and enjoyable games, and you don't need to have monetary investment to be able to get your games into a marketplace where people can enjoy them and people can, you know, pay a bit of money for something that they like, and you can sustain yourself as a living creating the games that you love. So, I mean, it is a really good time to be an indie developer, but I also think, you know, there are a lot of advantages to indie developers which you can, you know, really embrace if it's something that you want to do. I mean, that said, it doesn't come without its challenges, and I think one of the biggest challenges for indies, particularly on the mobile platform, and I guess if you're going for the mobile platform, that's a choice that you make, but there is an element of exposure. It makes it difficult to get out there and be heard, and you're competing with a lot of other people who also are making games just as good as yours, and you know, you have to try and, you know, work out, well, what is it about what I'm doing that's going to make people, you know, interested in it and make people, you know, say, yeah, I am a fan of this, I'm going to tell all my friends about it. So, I mean, it's, you know, indie development it's got so much easier and more accessible and more open, but that doesn't mean it's not without its challenges.
Yeah, I mean, there's the word of mouth has done wonders for various indie companies. If you look at people like Mode 7 or the Indie Stone, they've built entire communities around themselves and their games, which is a great bolster to them. And one thing I've recently discovered is that a lot of indies hire specific people from different companies to bring them in to give them a hand, which I think is quite lovely. Yeah. I was going to ask you if, obviously you're not a team of people. Being one person, how has that affected your development strategies, etc.?
Well, it's interesting. See, I've not found it to be a burden, to be honest. I enjoy doing all the programming. I enjoy doing all the artwork. I enjoy doing all the design. And to me, being able to get hands-on with everything is actually part of the fun and part of why I really wanted to do it the way that I'm doing it. So I've never found it to be an issue. I mean, I do think it is important, you know, to be able to collaborate and throw ideas around and, you know, bounce ideas off of your peers. But and that is something that, you know, being in a team can be quite useful for. So that is one of the challenges, and I guess you just have to be open about what you're doing and talk to lots of people about it, and, you know, get feedback wherever possible. But yeah, I'm not finding it to be a burden, but yeah, I'm not adverse to working with other people in the future. I think right now I really wanted to get out something that I could put my own stamp on and say, yeah, I made this and I'm really proud of it and I think you'll enjoy it, personally, from me to you.
Yeah, I mean, going from a game that you have made and you enjoyed making, and then putting it out there, what did you initially expect for it to do, or how it would spread?
To be honest, that's an interesting question, and
Oh, good.
I guess I guess when I put it out there, I didn't have a lot of specific expectations for it. I put it out into the App Store, and I was conscious that this was my first game that I had put out in that marketplace. I didn't know how people would respond to it, and although I had, people telling me about their own experiences and how it had gone for them, I didn't really know the ins and outs of it for myself. But luckily, what I had chosen to do right from the start is to focus on sort of small, agile developments. I mean, I'm a great believer in, concise games anyway. I'm not a big fan of stuff with a lot of content that takes you 20 hours to get through. I'm more of a fan of a kind of game that you can pick up, play, enjoy for half an hour, and then come back and play again and again for 20 hours because you love it so much. And so to me, that's all about having a very clear, interesting core mechanic that's simple to get the hang of, but has lots of room to evolve strategies out of it. So that's how I went about the design of Greedy Bankers. And another of the advantages of that is because it's all based around a clear core mechanic rather than, say, a lot of content. So I didn't, it wasn't like an RPG where I would have to write a lot of characters and scripts and things, and then I'd have to draw a lot of artwork for different characters and monsters and spells and things. Because it was all very self-contained in the core concept, it meant that I could develop it fairly quickly, put it out into the marketplace and see how people respond to it, and then iterate based on top of that. So one of the things people commented about was that they really liked the core game mode that was there, but they wanted some more variations on it, which is actually what gave rise to the multiplayer version on the iPad, because I thought, well, multiplayer I think is going to really add something to this, but it also gives people, something that they really want, which is, more variation in the game types, but it's a wide variation. It's something that's completely different to the core game, but with the exact same mechanics. That said, I am planning on updating the iPhone one with some new game modes hopefully in the next few weeks. But I guess I'll have to keep people posted on that because I don't know how long it'll take to implement the new stuff that I want to add in. But really, I mean, the core of it is I set this out there without any specific expectations of how it would do. My key interest was to get it out there and see how it would do, work out what I could learn from that, and then apply that to the next product to make sure that the next product is even better and even better targeted. And then from all the things I've learned from Bankers vs. the World, which has been getting rave reviews, which I'm really happy about, but there's still more things that I've learned from that, particularly in the promotion side, actually, that I say, that I want to apply to the next game and the next game after that. I don't think making games is, it's not a fire and forget process. You don't make a game, put it out there, make the next one. Every game is a precursor to the next one. Every game teaches you things that you'll be able to use in order to improve, in order to make your games more exciting, your business more viable. I mean, the whole thing. It's a constant learning process.
You mentioned something about new game modes. Can you talk about that, or do you want to keep that under wraps?
No, I can talk about that. The key thing, what I did with the original Greedy Bankers and then upgrading that to Bankers versus the World on the iPad, is I took the iPhone version and then I added stuff, or I built on that, added some new features, added in the multiplayer, added in the story mode where you play against an AI-driven banker and things like that. And what I'm doing now is adding in some extra features to the iPad version. I've just submitted a new game mode which should be up in the next few days, called Mystery Mode, where it shows you the colours of all the gems at the beginning and then hides them, and you have to memorise where all the gems are in order to arrange them into the shapes. But you have to use your memory to remember which colours went where. So it's quite bizarre. I've got another planned game mode, which is a more sort of time-based thing, where you're trying to keep the clock going, which is something I'm going to start experimenting with now. Now these will both go into the iPad version, and once they're in there, I'm going to port everything back from the iPad version. So all the improvements that are there on the iPad are going to be in the iPhone version. The only things that are going to be missing from the iPhone are going to be the multiplayer mode, because that needs the extra screen space. You know, that's when I created the multiplayer, I wanted to create something that would only work with the extra screen space given to you by the iPad, because to me that is really embracing what the tablet is all about. And unfortunately I can't put that back into a smaller screen, but such is life.
Definitely. With this increased range and plethora of game modes that you've implemented, have there been any emergent strategies or ways of playing that you hadn't thought of initially, that you've seen people do that are interesting?
Well, are you talking about the new iPhone game modes, or are you talking about the multiplayer, because the iPhone ones haven't appeared yet?
Well, I mean, any of the game modes that you've got in your game.
Well, I mean, the multiplayer was the really interesting one, because that was with the multiplayer. There was one thing that emerged just because it actually came as an accident, because I decided it would be easier just to have one big shared game board rather than two game boards, you know, one for each player. So I just did one big thing, and I realized, wait, well, the player on the left can just grab stuff from the player on the right. That's you know, that's a bit interesting. What happens with that? And I saw that sometimes players were stealing stuff from each other, and that was quite fun. And I thought, what if I incentivize this? What if I give you a bonus for everything you steal? And when I added that in, it was just like the secret sauce that transformed everything. And suddenly the game was like 10 times more manic, 10 times more sneaky, and you know, and it really fit into the whole greediness thing as well. So I mean, that's a really big one, and that was one of these things that, you know, started as an accident, and then I watched people, you know, making use of it and said, oh, I should get me some of that. I should be incentivizing this. This is brilliant. And I did, and it's become like the core feature of the game is the ability to steal from your opponent. I mean, there aren't a lot of multiplayer games out there on the iPad. There are even fewer multiplayer games that actively encourage you to cheat. So that was really, to me, that struck me as, okay, I've got an obvious unique selling point here. I should make use of this.
You've been making your games for, was it a couple of years now? Not very long.
Well, I've been running as a studio for about a year and 3 months now. Up until this, I was making them as a hobby for the past 10 years or something, and it was sort of when I left university, you know, I knew I wanted to go into the games industry, but I wanted to do things my way, and said, right, I'm going to have a good punt at starting up my own indie studio as a result.
When you did start up, what challenges did you face? Have you got any specific advice for people who do want to start up on their own?
My best advice is probably to, start right away, and I guess the key thing is keeping your costs down. I mean, if you can, put yourself in a situation where you don't need to go digging around for funding, whether that's because you have money saved up, or if you have a family who is willing to let you back into the family home and live in the basement so you don't have to pay so much rent. At the end of the day, if you can put yourself in a situation where your costs are low and you can just focus on producing the end product and creating the games, then that's what you want to be in. I think it can be a trap to see, to start by looking for funding and things, because that can be quite difficult and it can really distract you from your end goal. And if you can eliminate the need for it, then that probably puts you in a good position. Another thing I would say is, if you want to do this, focus on short, tight little projects. Don't go for a big overblown thing that will take you 9 months or a year, because at the end of that year, and it will take longer than you plan it to, you're going to end up with a game out there, and if it doesn't sell, you can learn things from that. If it sells, then great, but you can't really expect your first product to sell on your first shot. I mean, it's you've got to expect yourself to learn, and if you spend a lot of time producing that first product, get it out there, and then you'll learn a bunch of stuff from it. But if you've done a short game, then you could have learnt all that stuff like 6 months earlier and have a second game out there which makes use of everything that you've learned. And I guess if you are working on a budget, I mean, time is valuable. But that doesn't mean you have to make a bad game as a result. I mean, I am a big fan of short, concise, simple, punchy games. I'm a massive fan of scrolling shooters like Ikaruga and puzzle games like Puzzle Fighter and Puyo Pot Fever, things like that. And to me, those are games that you could produce something similar to that in a matter of months. If you're going to try and emulate Final Fantasy or Skyrim or something like that, you're probably setting yourself up for difficulties. But to me, I'm not actually that bothered about those games anyway. I like simple, punchy arcade games. I really like those kind of things. So, I mean, I guess I'm lucky that the kind of games that I think are the best to make are the kind of games that I enjoy playing the most, to be honest.
That would make sense. Yeah, you mentioned ways of setting up funding. I mean, there are alternatives like the reduced price beta and things like, what was it called? Kickstarter.
Kickstarter,
Did you think about using either of those?
I didn't initially, but I am considering doing it for my next project, just because, I mean, it would be nice to be able to you see, so far I do all the art and I do all the programming and the design and everything. The one thing that I have trouble with is the music. What I did with Bankers is I actually used Creative Commons stuff for that, which I was quite happy with. I like the music in it. But it would be nice to be able to get some bespoke music for that. But to be able to hire someone to do that, I would probably benefit from some funding. So a Kickstarter campaign might be a nice way to do that. But I haven't thought it through in a lot of detail, to be honest. But yeah, no, Kickstarter is an option. I mean, there are. I'm trying to think. I mean, the beta option is a great one as well, and one of the nice things about that is you're building up a community of passionate players, and the reason they're passionate is because they are part of the making of this game.
Definitely, they can see a lot of potential in what you're making. I've seen that all over the place.
And because they're invested in your making the game, because they're giving you the feedback and things that you need to keep running, and they were there right from the start. They feel passionate about it.
For it.
Sorry?
Playtesters that pay for you.
Yeah, but they'll also they will feel invested in what you're doing as a studio, and that means that you're likely to get a good bunch of followers and things who will help you promote your game when it comes to its eventual release. And that's really good. That's invaluable. I think people love stories. People, when it comes to, I've heard, I think it's Tad Kelly. He writes for Edge magazine. He also has a brilliant blog on game development called What Games Are. And one thing he constantly talks about is marketing stories. If you want to be able to sell your game and make a living off of it, you need to know your marketing story. But at the end of the day, people love stories, people love characters, people love personalities. And I'm not meaning like adding a load of characters to your game. I'm talking about being a character yourself, being a personality, being someone who has a story that is interesting to hear about, and say, oh wow, that's a really interesting story about that guy who made this game. He's really passionate about it. He always talks about the things that he loves, and his game is going to do something special, like cure world hunger or something. I don't know. But at the end of the day, if people have a story that they can say, yeah, I was involved in that, then they become disciples, and they will hopefully recommend your game to other people a lot more actively than, say, new casual players would. So I mean, the value of running an open beta isn't just in having playtesters paying you. It's not actually the value of it. The real value of it is in generating a community and a fan base, and that will take you a long way, and that will get people talking about what you're doing on a lot of the major blogs and sites and things. It's a promotional tool as well as a useful development tool, and there is nothing wrong with that. That is, very worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, one of the characters that you've been mentioning, Dan Marshall of Size 5 Games, who recently won a BAFTA for his game Privates, which is essentially a sex education game, and it
is a sex education game. It was commissioned by Channel 4 as part of their educational remit, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, it's such a funny game. Have you played it?
I haven't. No, I mean, I've got.
It is definitely free.
It is definitely free. I think it's PC only thing, and unfortunate, as far as I know, it's PC only. They might have ported it, but unfortunately, I do most of my stuff on a Mac now, and my PC is running pretty close to the ground. I don't think it would perform massively well under the strain of 3D.
So it's not ready for Skyrim?
No.
Okay. You mentioned that you were considering Kickstarter for your new project.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got a bunch of ideas for my new project. The main thing that I'm going to do is do like public prototype versions. So I'm going to do a bunch of prototypes. I'm going to put them up on my website, on my blog. I'm going to, notify all of the press people that I can think of to try and get them to encourage people to help me out with it.
Right.
By saying, hey, this guy, he's doing this thing, you should all take a look at it, which would be nice. But essentially, generate feedback on the prototypes publicly and find out what works, what doesn't work. I've got a few ideas jumping around in my head about sort of, a lot of sort of strategy-based stuff. Kind of hard to explain really, because it's all very much the germs of an idea that I haven't had the time to prototype. But my plan is essentially I'm going to start some Flash prototypes, throw them out there, put them up in as many places as possible, and try and generate some feedback to help inform me on what works and what doesn't, and then build it up from there. I think. I mean, there's still plenty more that I want to do with the Bankers games, so that's another thing. I guess this is going to something I'm going to start very soon, which will run tangent to continuing the updates to Greedy Bankers and Greedy Bankers versus the World.
Yeah, going back to Greedy Bankers versus the World, I was going to ask you the question, what do the bankers think?
What do the bankers think? Well, it's funny. When I was developing the game, I tried. When I was designing the banker characters, I ran into a problem because as soon as I sat down to draw them, I thought, wait, what does a banker actually look like? So what I did is I drew all these pictures of what I thought looked like bankers, and I put them up on my blog and Twitter and things, and sought feedback from all the people I knew. One of whom was a former investment banker, and he gave me the best feedback out of anyone. He was like, no, that doesn't look like a banker. Bankers wear this, this, and this, and things like that. You just sort of, it's all stuff like, it's a dark suit. Bankers don't wear bright suits, they wear, dark suits, but the linings are very extravagant colours to make them look like, they're real go-getters and things like that. And the ties as well, which is why I worked it in. I think one of the bankers has a, it's a dark suit, but it's a bright red tie and things like that. And you build up these things, and eventually it starts looking like a banker. And I think he might have been the one who suggested having dollar bills just poking out of all his pockets and
yeah, they've got that stuff absolutely everywhere, haven't they?
Yeah, just to make it look like, it doesn't just make them look like bankers, it makes them look greedy as well, because it's like, I am filled with money. And these were all motifs that I used, but actually, yeah, a lot of them came from a real banker. So yeah, but I don't know, it hasn't broken through into the financial community in the way that I would like it to, but I am considering going up to the city and trying to advertise it in person at some of the big banking areas, like the oh god, I've forgotten the name of it, in London, Canary Wharf and everything like that.
Yeah.
And see if there's any mileage in sort of demoing it up there. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, your characters are wonderfully drawn. You've got, my favourite character was definitely the was it the ATM machine?
Yeah. He's my favourite to draw, actually.
Yeah, he deposits big bonuses for bankers, or was that, I can't remember what you wrote.
I think he was like an artificial intelligence designed. He's designed to turn the government bailouts into big bonuses. That's what he's designed for.
Ah, yes.
Minus bonuses for senior managers.
Moving on. Obviously, your game is completely tongue-in-cheek. You have a good poke at the bankers, but there are other games that use gameplay to introduce their own and force their own point of view on players. I mean, they use it as a form of propaganda. How do you feel about this invasive mode of gameplay?
See, that is another interesting question.
Hooray.
And I'm not sure. I mean, it's not something I'd want to do as a developer, to be honest. I do think, I mean, there's things like America's Army and things like that, which are effectively recruitment campaigns for the US Army. And there's something that I don't like about the idea that video games are used to glamorize things which are actually, which are actually serious and dangerous and not very nice. I think with that kind of thing, like, if you're persuading someone to join the army off the back of playing a video game and making it look really interesting and exciting and glamorous, then I think, because joining the army is dangerous, it's, you could die, and I don't think you should encourage people. People should be going up and signing up because they believe in what they're doing, not because they thought it looked cool from a video game. Mm-hmm. But then on the other perspective, this is the exact, Call of Duty and Battlefield already do this, and it's not because they're trying to recruit anyone, it's because people are already interested in it. Mm. And then you have the whole question of, with sort of propaganda in games and things like that, that, well, if people are this easily swayed, then how come you're worried, then by the same argument, they're going to be easily swayed by violence and, sort of offensive language and sexual things and things like that people are trying to stamp down. And how come to a lot of gamers, how can one be all right and the other not be all right? And I think at the end of the day, I'm fairly confident that people can make their own decisions, and I don't believe that you should censor any of it. You are allowed to find it offensive. If you don't like it, you can find it offensive, but at the end of the day, it all has a right to be there on the shelf. But one of the things I didn't want to be overt with the political message in my own, in Greedy Bankers, and it's actually, as I described, it's really in my heart, it's a lot more subversive than it actually looks on paper, because the game isn't really out there criticizing the bankers, damning the bankers or anything. It's really just presenting these funny characters in situations, based off of the financial climate, and it's up to you to decide how you feel about that.
I think one of the important things is putting the player in a position where they can decide for themselves. And I mean, your game is definitely, at its very core, it's a puzzle game. Yeah. With funny bankers in it.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, I mean, really, the message from me isn't, damning the bankers, but it's also, the real message is actually about, why is this, do we have this necessity in our everyday life to put a villain into every situation? And I guess that's probably a bit more subversive than people pick up on, and I don't really talk about it a lot. So I guess if you're this far through listening to the podcast, you've just picked up a juicy bit of information. But yeah, I mean, to me, that's what I wanted to do. It was more of a kind of, the message really is in, look at this thing, how do you feel about how you react to it, rather than saying you should feel this or you should feel that or these people are bad. I guess I don't know if that makes any sense.
I
think these things are hard to describe. I think, and that's why you need to create.
It's a very complex issue. I mean, there was a very good episode of Extra Credits on it that gave me the idea for that question.
I like Extra Credits. They're a good show.
Are you thirsty?
Sorry?
Sorry, I thought I heard you drinking.
You did hear me drink, sorry.
No,
is that audible?
Yeah, it was just a funny sound. It's fine.
All right, no, that was
probably going to keep it in. I do minimal editing.
Oh god, that's terrifying.
So, moving on. More light-hearted. Are there any indie games out there that you particularly enjoyed that you would encourage people to go out and see if they like?
Okay, one that recently came out. There's a couple that recently came out on iPhone and iPad. One of them, These Robotic Hearts of Mine, is by an old friend of mine from university. So I am a little biased in this one because he's a really nice guy and everything. But it is a fantastic, simple, abstract puzzle game where you have to rotate these cogs with hearts attached to them, and you have to rotate them so all the hearts are facing upright. It's kind of a bit like a 2D Rubik's Cube on a flat plane. It's very strange. It has this narrative running through it about a boy and a girl who fall in love and then find a broken robot in the woods and try to repair it and stuff, and it all goes pear-shaped from there. And yeah, it's a very interesting game. That was another one of the Eurogamer Indie Arcade finalists. Another one I'd recommend is English Country Tune, which has just come out on iPhone and iPad, from Increpare, or Stephen Lavelle, as he is known in the real world. This game, it's kind of like, if you liked Soccer Ban, you'll love this. If you didn't like Sokoban, like me, you will still love this. It's similar to Sokoban, but it's all done on this sort of 3D boxes, 3D cube shapes that you can go around the outside of. And when you're pushing things around, it's not just you stand on the side of it and push it. Some of them, like there are these balls which drop, but the way that gravity affects them depends on which side you push them from. Or there's these boxes with light beams coming out of them, and so you push the light beams, and even if you're miles away from it, if you push the light beam, it'll move, and you have to move these things into targets and things. And it's a real sort of mind-bending puzzles. So fresh and original, and atmospheric as well. It's got this real kind of gloomy, sort of David Lynch salad fingers kind of background music in the background, which I really like. And yeah, another game that I've been playing a lot recently is The Binding of Isaac by Ed McMillan, who
yes,
one of the people behind
wonderful.
Super Meat Boy. And that's just, it's I love the setting because it's so grim and macabre, but it's also, there's all the random elements. I like the fact that so much of the game is based around random elements, and that so whenever you get an option to pick up an object or go into a room, you're making a judgment call based on whether it's worth the risk. Because you don't know what all the items do, you don't know what all the pills that you can eat do, you don't know what's in all the rooms, and you have to think, is it worth the risk of going behind that door, or should I just leave it aside? And it's randomly generated every time, so you always have that risk. And that's something I really want to experiment with my next game, is using randomness and unpredictability to create tension and meaningful choices. So yeah, very interesting games.
Definitely, with Binding of Isaac, it's quite a dangerous game. My favourite part of it is the fact that some of the upgrades, I mean, you get more powerful if you survive. I mean, as you get through, you have to mutilate yourself to make yourself more powerful. Like there's
it becomes more grim and mutated, but there's also things like there's the devil rooms
deals
where,
with the devil, yes.
Yeah, and you can exchange half of your life bar for the ability to fly, or to be super powerful, or to have extra lives or something. And that's what I mean. That's about these meaningful choices, and you don't know what's going to pop up in the next room, so based on what you think's going to happen, you have to say, is it worth spending half my life bar on this awesome power up, or should I just play it safe? And I've had situations where I've been sat in those rooms for ages thinking, oh god, what should I do, and just deliberating over it. And it's all meaningful. That's what's so exciting about it. It's all meaningful decisions. It's and it is, in many ways, it's a game of strategy, and I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, because it's roguelike, so if you die, you just have to start again. I haven't been able to finish it. I just get murdered.
Yeah,
in horrible
I've got to
ways.
the final boss a couple of times, but that's it. But I mean, it's like roguelike, but it is very reassuring that it is so easy to pick up and play again. The play sessions aren't necessarily that long, and every time you play it, it is a completely different game, because all the items and things are so wildly different from each other. So when you die, you don't feel upset about it. You just want to try again, and that's really good. If you'd been spending an hour on it and then you died, then it would probably be a bit more irritating. But and if you had to go through stuff that you knew what was going to happen, it would be kind of annoying to have to restart from the beginning. But when it's all completely different, it's this is great. This is a whole new adventure. Let's try again.
Yeah, it's a brilliant game. I mean, I picked it up from the what was it? It was one of the Indie Humble bundles.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got about 5 games for. It was a pay what you want thing, and some of it went to charity, like the EFF and Child's Play.
Yeah,
I think that's a really good idea. Have you seen many of those? There's the ones I've seen are Indie Royale and Indie Humble Bundle.
Yes, I'm trying to think of any others that I know of, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. But they are good. I mean, it's. I mean, apparently they generate a lot of sales for the developers, which is all very good. They generate a lot of money for charity, which is also very good. And I think they encourage people to try out new things, because they'll always, like, when you buy a bundle, you might buy it because there's 1 or 2 games in that bundle that you really want, but there'll always be an extra couple in there that you haven't thought about, and then you can try them out, and you can say, oh wow, I just bought that at random, didn't expect it to be this good. And I think a lot of, like, that feeling of finding a game, you know, completely at random and then really enjoying it, I think is one of the real most memorable experiences as a gamer. I think a lot of my favourite games I have bought expecting them to be okay, you know, this will last me a few days, it'll be fun, and I've spent like ages being hooked to them. So
some of the best games do that.
Yeah.
Take you by surprise.
Yep.
Okay, so I think you've exhausted my list of questions.
I'm a very exhausting person, I'm sorry.
No, it was brilliant. So if you'd like to finish off by giving us a summary of where we can get your game, and any final words?
Yeah, okay, well, Greedy Bankers on the iPhone is 69p. You can get that from the App Store. Greedy Bankers versus the World is on iPad, also in the App Store, £1.99, and it's amazing multiplayer fun. We've had a few taken it to a lot of events, had some good wrestling matches that started as a result of it, so you know, it's it does encourage violence, but in a good way. And it's really fun, so you should get them both, and then pay me lots of money so I can buy myself a yacht.
You are greedy, sir.
Yeah, I know. I've just picked it up from being around the bankers so much. It's all that research, you know. You do all that research, and it just affects the way you see the world. No, if you want to give them a go, please purchase them, because I would really appreciate it, and tell your friends, because I'd appreciate that as well. I'm not greedy. I just need the money to live and continue doing what I'm doing. And yeah, I guess my final words would be, have fun. Indie games are awesome. I don't know. Can I just make my final words by my games again, in case people switched off and stopped listening? Then here's another final message. You should buy Greedy Bankers and Greedy Bankers versus the World, because they're really good fun.
Okay, we'll make that like a moral for the week or something.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Brilliant.
Anyway, thanks very much. It's been really good to talk to you.
You're very welcome. It's been wonderful listening to you.
Cheers.
Hopefully I'll be able to get in touch with you again, talk about any new projects or anything in the future.
Yeah, that would be great. Just let me know. I'd be more than happy to chat to you again.
Brilliant. Thank you, and goodbye.
Bye-bye now.